Hi, I'm Anna. Welcome back to Books on the Go. Today I'm doing a fun tag that Shawn did on his channel, Shawn the Book Maniac, and it's called 10 Strange Bookish Facts About Me, which I really enjoyed watching his video, which I'll link below, and I thought I'd do the tag as well. We'll just get straight into it. So number one, I don't plan to read A Little Life by Hannah Yanagihara. That's strange in the bookish world because everyone that I know of has read it or talked about it. So much we could do a whole video on A Little Life, and the funny thing about that is I feel like I could do a whole video even not having read it, which is part of the reason I don't think I need to read it, because I feel like I have, because I heard so much about it when it came out. But a couple of reasons. One, I think it sounds too bleak, and another one is it sounds too long and also not edited, and that I think she did that deliberately to keep it feeling raw, which I respect that, but I think it would annoy me as a reader knowing what I'm like. But it does sound like a book that's very accessible and a real page turner. But I listened to a great discussion with Annabelle Crabb and Lee Sales on their podcast Chat 10 Looks 3, and Lee Sales was on the ABC First Tuesday Book Club where they talked about A Little Life, and she didn't read it, and it was one of the first times that's ever happened on that show, because the guests always have to read the book they're talking about. And she said, I just find there are too many traumatic events in my work life that I deal with every night on the 7:30 show, and I didn't need to be picking that up at 9:30 when I go to bed and then have the same thing. But Annabelle had read it and said she couldn't stop turning the pages, but it was very grim. And at the end, Lee said, well, are you glad you read it? And Annabelle said, no, not really. And I think, well, that's probably enough for me. I don't think I need to go there. But there you go, unpopular opinions about books. So number two, this is not such an unpopular opinion, but I don't like movie tie-in covers. So there you go. I'm looking for a book and it's the movie tie-in cover. I will try to find it elsewhere. I'll go to a different bookshop. I'll seek out another copy. But I have become more discerning about covers. That's just something I've noticed, and I will now really appreciate a good cover. So for example, My Sister the Serial Killer has an excellent cover, and just a really well designed cover. So when it has just the photo from the movie, there's something about it that I don't love. Sometimes they become quite iconic in their own right. So there's a book in Australia called Storm Boy by Colin Teeley, and there's an image from the original 1976 movie that's really iconic, that's kind of and the same with Picnic at Hanging Rock. There's a book that came out when the Peter Weir movie in the 70s was out with the Miranda, the character Miranda, and it's actually now a vintage piece in its own right. But that's, there are exceptions, but generally we like to avoid. Number three, when I'm traveling, I take books and I don't read on a Kindle. So I do travel a fair bit, so it's not very practical. I'm someone who should be using a Kindle or reading on an iPad or something, and I just prefer to have the paper book. So I tend to take a few in my suitcase, and then I'll take one on carry-on, and I end up buying more when I'm away. And it weighs things down, but I prefer that experience of reading. So look, I really should. The other thing I do occasionally is audiobooks, so that's another way around it for traveling, but very occasionally. So number four, another thing that I'm quite specific about and I'm becoming more so with traveling, is I really like reading books set in the destination, and I've now really prefer to read books by a local author. So and that I've actually discovered some great translated literature that way. So, for example, we went to Japan last year and I did this sort of deep dive into Japanese literature and read some classics that were completely new to me, like The Hunting Gun and The Bullfight, and I've forgotten the author's name. Is it Inoue? Heigo Higashino, I read another one by him, and The Snow Country, which I know Shawn has actually been reading recently. But yeah, I did, and again we went to Spain and I did a whole sort of Barcelona theme and discovered Merce Roderida, who is an amazing author and I would never have found her if I wasn't seeking out Catalonia books. So that's something I've been enjoying, but again, just very specific. And number 5, I tend to, in terms of how I read, now I tend to read one book at a time. And it's interesting that that's changed really since I joined Litsy a couple of years ago, because what I tend to do, and it's a good discipline I've found, is once I finish a book, I do a short review, and that is limited by character. I think it's 450 characters now. So it's it's very manageable, and I find that it's a good discipline to make me stop and think about that book and put my thoughts down, even if it's only a couple of sentences, before I move on to the next book. And it's actually very calming to read that way, because I used to have a few different books on the go, and I'd have one that I'd pick up and put down, and then another one on my bedside table, and I'd have another book stacked up on the kitchen table, and I've always felt a bit like my reading was out of control. And it's distracting, because then when you go back to one of the books, you're thinking about the other book and whether you're always thinking I should go back to that one. Whereas if you just read one at a time, I find I enjoy it more that way. So I've been doing that for the most part. Sometimes I have a different one on the go, but that's been in the last couple of years. And number 6, I will bail on books that I'm not enjoying. So that's not that strange, I suppose, but it is. I do still not. Even my mum the other day was reading a book that I hadn't liked, and she said, I'm not liking it either, but she was persevering. I said, just put it down. There are so many books. She said, no, once I start, I have to finish it. And I don't do that anymore, because life's too short. I have so many books that I want to read, and so many really good books. So I just, and I know Shawn's really good on bailing. I bail not as often now, because I think I'm more selective about the books I buy, and I sort of know what I might like and what I won't. But yeah, I will just stop reading. It's always still a hard decision, because you think, what am I missing? Is it going to get better? But yeah, I will stop if I'm not enjoying it. Number 7, when I'm reading, I can't write in books or underline or do any markings, and I don't turn the page. I used to turn the pages over when I was young, but I don't do that anymore. So I like to keep them in as good condition as I can. And if it's a book that I really like and that's good quality, I won't take it to the beach now, because I've just learnt from experience it becomes all sandy and kind of wrecked, basically. So I'm quite protective of my books now, much more than I used to be. But I do put sticky notes in, so there'll be a sentence that I want to go back to, or if I'm doing a review, little sections that I want to refer to. So I put flags, but that's all. Number 8, so I like giving books as gifts, but I will only do that if I have read the book. I find it strange to give a book that I haven't read, because I like to give it as something meaningful, to say, well, I really enjoyed this and I hope that you like it as well. So that's just a gift bookish fact. And number 9, I don't like books that are unfinished. You know, sometimes they'll publish something posthumously and they'll say, oh, this is what the author was working on, and, you know, we're now publishing it as a novel. And I'm a bit suspicious of that, or not suspicious, but I think, well, it won't be as good as if they'd finished it, or maybe they didn't even want it to be published in that form. So there's The Pale King by David Foster Wallace, which was unfinished, and that I've even though I loved Infinite Jest, I haven't gone to that one because I'm just feeling skeptical about it. And I think there was one by F. Scott Fitzgerald, wasn't there? Was it Tender as the Night? There was one that they said he'd just been working on right at the end. And yeah, there are others. And the other thing I don't really like is the tributes, when someone writes something and carries on with a series as if they are that author, like the Steg Larsen, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. There's been a new one that I don't know. I only want to read, you know, the original author. Number 10. Oh, that's again back to gifts. I do like books being inscribed. I like receiving books with an inscription in them, and I think that doesn't get done enough now. I don't know if it's an old-fashioned thing, but I always like a personal note, and that's, I guess, the same thing of giving a book that means something to you, and then writing that in the inscription is a really thoughtful touch. So that is it. 10 strange bookish facts about me. I'd love to know your strange bookish habits and quirks, so let me know in the comments, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.